It began on an ordinary morning inside the police department, but what happened next would leave the entire unit stunned. A black man who had been quietly fighting for his rights finally discovered that his case was being tampered with in secret. Behind closed doors, one officer decided to cross the line, digging into files he had no authority to touch. He thought no one would notice, but the truth has a way of finding its way out. What he expected to be just another act of control quickly spiraled into something he never imagined. The officer's actions weren't only illegal, they were fueled by arrogance, and that made the fallout even more powerful. The black man at the center of it all had already endured enough, but this time, justice moved faster than anyone predicted. Word spread through the department, whispers grew into questions, and questions turned into an investigation. Suddenly, the officer who once believed he held all the power found himself facing something he had never prepared for. When the termination papers landed in front of him, the room froze. But that was only the beginning, because the way it all unfolded revealed more than just misconduct. It uncovered a deeper truth no one saw coming. The story goes back weeks earlier, when the black man first noticed small irregularities in his case. Documents he remembered submitting seemed to vanish, and new statements appeared that he had never seen before. At first, he questioned himself, wondering if stress was clouding his memory. But as the inconsistencies grew, it became clear someone was working behind the scenes. That suspicion weighed on him daily, but he kept quiet, waiting for the right moment to prove it. Inside the department, the officer carried himself with false confidence. To his colleagues, he looked like someone who always got away with bending rules. He had built a reputation for being untouchable, the kind of figure no one dared to challenge. But his ambition and arrogance blinded him to the dangers of crossing certain lines. When he accessed the restricted files, he thought it was just another move to push his own agenda forward. What he didn't realize was that every keystroke left a trace, and every choice carried a consequence. The deeper he went, the more evidence stacked against him. As the days passed, tension built silently in the corridors. Questions hung in the air, but no one dared to speak them aloud. The truth, however, was getting closer. As the investigation quietly unfolded, more layers of the conflict began to surface. The black man realized his case was not just about him, it had become a mirror of something bigger inside the department. Other officers had noticed questionable behavior before, but fear of speaking up kept them silent. Now, with digital records under review, conversations began to shift in hushed tones. Some officers felt torn, caught between loyalty to a longtime colleague and the reality of what the evidence revealed. The black man, meanwhile, struggled with mixed emotions. On one hand, he wanted justice for the injustice done to him. On the other, he knew exposing this officer could bring unwanted attention, putting him in the center of a storm he never asked for. Friends urged him to stay strong, reminding him that his fight could open doors for others who faced the same treatment but never had the chance to speak. That pressure weighed heavy, but it also fueled his determination. Behind closed doors, department leaders began holding late-night meetings. They weren't only worried about the officer's misconduct, they feared what the public might say if the story reached outside walls. Every day that passed without answers only built more suspense, leaving everyone waiting for the moment when silence would break. The tension reached a breaking point when a confidential report was leaked inside the department. It confirmed what many had quietly suspected: the officer had accessed restricted files multiple times, each action recorded in undeniable detail. Whispers turned into stares whenever he walked into the room. Some avoided him, others questioned how much longer leadership could keep the matter contained. The walls of silence that once protected him were starting to crumble. The black man at the heart of the case felt the weight of every passing hour. Each call he received from lawyers and advocates reminded him that the outcome of this investigation would not only shape his future but could also change how the department handled accountability. His nights grew restless, his thoughts circling the same questions: would the truth really come out? Or would power once again bury the evidence? Inside headquarters, the atmosphere thickened. Files were being pulled, statements reviewed, and senior officials demanded answers with growing urgency. The officer himself began to sense the shift. His once steady confidence faltered as he noticed eyes watching him, conversations stopping when he entered a room. The silence was no longer protection, it was judgment. Everyone knew something was about to break, but no one knew how hard the impact would be. Just when it seemed the officer's downfall was inevitable, a shocking discovery added a dangerous twist. Investigators found that the files he accessed were not limited to the black man's case. Several other cases had been quietly altered in ways no one had noticed before. Each tampered record pointed back to the same login, the same reckless hand behind the screen. What was once thought to be a single act of misconduct now looked like a much larger pattern, one that could shake the entire department if it went public. The revelation stunned everyone involved. Some officers began to fear for their own reputations, wondering if cases they had worked on were also compromised. Others worried the department's credibility would collapse overnight if the truth leaked beyond the station walls. The leadership, already scrambling, now faced a crisis far deeper than they ever anticipated. For the black man, the twist was both vindication and a new source of dread. His fight was no longer about one case, it had become evidence of a system far more fragile than anyone admitted. Every passing moment intensified the stakes. The question was no longer if the officer would face consequences, but how far the fallout would spread once the final curtain was pulled back. The breaking point came when the internal review was presented to the department's top board. The evidence was overwhelming: login trails, altered documents, and testimony from colleagues who finally stepped forward. The officer was summoned into the room where the findings were read aloud. His face, once so sure of its untouchable power, went pale as the termination papers were placed before him. The same hands that had tampered with justice now trembled, knowing his career was finished. For the black man, the moment was bittersweet. He finally saw accountability delivered in front of those who once doubted him. His case was restored, his voice validated, and the department forced to admit the truth. But just as relief began to wash over him, the final twist hit harder than anyone expected. Buried in the investigation was a detail no one had noticed before: another name tied to the illegal access. The disgraced officer had not acted alone. The room fell silent as the revelation sank in. Leadership realized that what they thought was an isolated betrayal was only the surface of something deeper. While the officer signed his termination papers, everyone in the room knew the story wasn't over. Another shadow still lingered, waiting to be revealed. In the weeks that followed, the department worked tirelessly to uncover the full truth. More files were reviewed, and the second name linked to the tampering was quietly investigated. It turned out to be someone high enough to influence decisions but hidden enough to avoid suspicion for years. That revelation forced leadership to act quickly, removing not just the disgraced officer but also exposing the network that had allowed such misconduct to thrive. For the black man, the resolution felt like a turning point. His case was not only restored but became the reason sweeping reforms were introduced. New safeguards were put in place to ensure no officer could ever alter records without oversight again. What started as a personal battle transformed into a change that would protect countless others in the future. The department, though shaken, began rebuilding its image. Community leaders were invited into discussions, transparency became a new standard, and trust, though fragile, started to grow again. The officer's fall from power became a reminder of how arrogance and corruption always leave a trail behind. In the end, the story left one clear message: truth can be delayed but never erased. Justice, though slow at times, has a way of finding the light and rewriting the ending.